Hey everybody, how's it going? Azren, the language nerd here. I'm the owner of the Calgary Language Nerds. We offer classes online and in person if you're in my city, if you're in Calgary, for a wide variety of different languages. And welcome to another one of these videos in this series on how to learn another language. We're going to dive directly into the video today. So let me share my screen and we can begin. Okay, so we're currently in the level 1 curriculum, and we'll take up from where we left off last time. So last time we left off here with short sentences using the word is. So for example, looking at things like that is a dog. What we learn, or rather what you learn while you're going through this step in the curriculum, is going to build directly off of what you did previously in this curriculum here. If I rewind a little bit, we go backwards. You learned how to say ask. You learned how to ask, what's this or what's that? And you learned how to say this is a or that is a. And this is something that we're going to use quite a bit in this next part of the program. As a reminder, in fact, let's stay here for a second. As a reminder, things do not translate directly between languages. For example, in English, we only have one word for a. Like, this is a stapler. These are some scissors. It's a little different, but then again, that's these are, so it's not quite the same as this is, but really we don't have that many options for this is, right? But if you look at a language such as, French, right? French is a gendered language. French is a language that has masculine and feminine. So saying this is a phone versus, whatever else I have here. This is a window. I have a window right beside me. The word for is going to be different, depending on if you're speaking of a phone or a window. So it's important to remember that not everything's going to translate directly. Your job, as a recap here, your job, if something doesn't translate literally, right? Here's our important reminder. If something does not translate word per word, remember, your job is to first find something general that you can use in a pinch. So for example, in this example, you can see on my screen, for hi in Mandarin, you might have ni hao, because ni hao will work in a wide variety of different circumstances. You can use it all the time. But there is a bit more nuance in Mandarin, right? And over time, you can learn some of those nuances. Or the other example I provided earlier was, if we go backwards here, oh, where is it? It's actually in the previous book. That's okay. The other example I provided was with the word yes and no, right? And yet for Mandarin and yes and no, you don't really have a great translation. In fact, yes and no is probably a better example to use than saying hello in Mandarin, but there isn't a great word for yes and no in Mandarin. You kind of have, you don't have a great word for yes and no in Mandarin. You kind of are a little bit more, there's quite a few ways you might be able to say it, but what you're trying to find is something you can use in a pinch, but then you also have to go and learn what the rules are and try to figure it out as well. Does that make sense? So that's what's going to happen as you go into the step. Please remember that. Okay, so let me tell you a story. And this is the basis of this chapter here. So when I was making this particular chapter, I had a cousin who was 20 months old. He's now older than that now because it's been a little bit of time since I made this program. But at the time, he was 20 months old. So he was a toddler. And so he was still learning to speak English, right? It was still something he was learning. So something he would do all the time is he would walk around and he would just point at things and ask an adult what that thing is called. I can't remember what he used to say, if he just pointed and said that, or I forget how he asked, but he would basically point at things and he'd be asking an adult, like, what is that called? Sometimes he'd make a mistake, right? He pointed at a bunny once and he called it a puppy, right? And so we had to correct him. We said, oh, no, it's a bunny. Look, hop, 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 hop. And then my cousin then repeated and he said, oh, bunny, hop, hop, hop. And then he started to hop as well. He's a bit older now, but he's still learning to speak. He's now just over 2 years old. And still, he was over at our house just the other day. And same thing, he kind of wanders around the house and he plays with things, he makes messes, he touches things, he jumps around, he says random words, whatever comes to mind. He's exploring the world around him and he's learning about the world around him, right? And so this is what I think this is an important stage, even when you're an adult, to go through this phase nice and early on. Okay. And so being able to, what I would call label things and explore the world around you using the target language as a tool is something that will be very effective. And so we're going to play, or rather you're going to play, when you're learning a language, I want you to play a game called What's This? Okay, so let's go to the next page here. Oops, I went too far. Here are the instructions. First of all, you are going to select 15 or more objects in your home, okay? And you're going to book an appointment with your tutor or your language partner. If you have a tutor, you're going to book it with your tutor. If it's a language partner, you're going to do it with your language partner. What you're then going to do is you're going to point at each object you selected, and you're going to ask your language partner or your tutor in the target language, what's this or what's that? So you might have picked a phone, you might pick, I remember I did this, I might even have a recording of it, possibly. I'm not sure, I'd have to look. But I have a Japanese class where I just pick stuff in this office, literally like computer screens and phones and like staplers and like chairs and headphones and computers and windows and all these things around me. And I was like, oh, like, what's this? What's this? Oh, what's that? Oh, and what's this? And what's that? And I would just go around and I was literally exploring the room and learning how to say different things. My tutor or language partner would, in my case, it was a tutor, but my tutor would tell me, oh, that is blah, blah, blah. That is blah, blah, blah. And he would help me understand what is in the world around me. And I would then repeat it back to my tutor and get feedback on my pronunciation. I love pronunciation, so I was trying to get it really exact, but you don't have to try and get it exact. Think of it like a baby, right? And when a baby or a toddler is trying to say something, if it's not exact, you don't worry too much. You just model the correct behavior. The child pays close attention, and over time, they train their mouth to say it correctly. I think that can happen too. As long as you're listening really closely, you're getting some feedback on your pronunciation, you're repeating it a lot, you'll be able to have clear pronunciation. If you want perfect pronunciation, like I really like having perfect pronunciation, I get really nitpicky on the pronunciation. But you don't have to be super nitpicky. That's how nitpicky you are, how picky you are is your decision essentially. But you want to make sure it's at least clear and that others can understand you. Okay. Now, as you're going through this process, I mentioned this near the beginning. Remember that there are articles in many languages. In English, we have a, some, the. Those are some articles. This is a pen. These are some pens. This is the fridge. Some languages don't have articles. Some languages have lots of articles. Different languages have different views on articles. And so as you're going through this process, it's important for you to remember, if there are articles in the language you're learning, it's important for you to try and remember what article goes with the word that you're learning. My personal view at this point in time is I'm not necessarily someone who would recommend going crazy deep into the grammar at this point in time. So for instance, let's say you didn't know that French was a language that had genders, okay? And you learned this as un téléphone, a phone, but une fenêtre. Un téléphone, une fenêtre. And you didn't know French had genders. I wouldn't worry too much about why it's un téléphone and une fenêtre. I wouldn't worry about that. I would just make a mental note of, un téléphone, une fenêtre, and keep learning more and more objects and accept it as a fact of the language. Accept that, sometimes I say un, sometimes I say une. I don't really know why, but let's just move on. And I'm going to understand this pattern over time. Now, an important caveat. There are some people where that's going to drive you crazy. There are some people, just how your DNA is, just how your brain is wired, just how your life experiences have been. For some reason, you are the type of person where you cannot you cannot help but ask yourself the question, why is it un téléphone and une fenêtre? Like, what's happening here? And now all of a sudden you want to dive into that grammar and you really want to go into it. That's fine. You can. There's nothing wrong with it. What I would encourage you to do, though, is if you're going to do that, it's very important you remember this analogy that rules and grammar equals salt. Because when people dive into grammar rabbit holes and they try to really delve into grammar, sometimes what happens is it starts to get overwhelming. So at the point where it gets overwhelming, you have to leave it alone. You have to leave it alone. You have to stop, okay? And revisit it later. That's the biggest thing. So if you want to go, my personal preference is I don't go crazily into grammar initially. I let my brain, I want to have a hypothesis of what's happening grammar-wise. I want to have a hypothesis before I go really deep into the grammar. That's usually my general rule of thumb that I follow. I want to have learned, I want to know this is un téléphone, une fenêtre, une personne, a person, right? Just looking around me here, like une table, or like une chaise, but whatever else I have around here, un crayon, right? And be like, okay, sometimes something une, I think there's a pattern here. I think there's not a pattern. Once I have some kind of hypothesis, that's when I start to test my hypothesis and look deeper into it. That's me. Doesn't have to be the way you go about it. Just remember that rules and grammar equal salt analogy, and you'll be just fine. Okay. So I've put a little, for those of you that purchase the workbooks that come with this course, I've put a table you can use to track the words that you're learning in your house, all the household objects. There's space for 15. I put space for 20, it looks like, or yes, 20. I put space for 20. You can, of course, print out more of these papers, or you can use more, copying them. There's a digital version and a physical version, so you can kind of let me know which one you want, and I'll send you the one that works best for you. So you can put more if you want to. You're not limited to 20 per se, but for those of you that do purchase the workbook off the website, so that's azrenthelanguagenerd.com/free course, AZ or Z REN thelanguagenerd.com/free course. You can purchase that there if you're interested. If not, you can very easily make this in Word or draw it out or actually write it out in a notebook. Like you can very easily make this. It's not that difficult. Okay. So you're going to choose 15 objects from your house, write them on your list as you talk to your language partner. You say, hey, so what's this in Japanese? Oh, that's okay, great. Remember, do this in the target language. Once you've done that, I've given you a writing exercise here. I want you to actually write 5+ sentences using this is and that is, right? So this is a phone, this is a pencil, this is a whatever you've learned around your house. And you're gonna start actually writing those out for some writing practice. I've put a sheet in the workbook if you want to do any additional practice, any additional notes, anything else you want to write, maybe some grammar points you stumbled across, right? This is where you'd write those grammar points and write those in. So anything else I want to say on this chapter before we move on? Let me see here. I suppose a couple small things. One thing you could do if you're more of an explorative person and you're less of a black and white person, maybe you don't, one alternative to this activity is that you do not pre-select your objects. So for example, here it says, select 15+ objects in your house, right? You may not pre-select those objects. Like when I do this, I don't pre-select them. I actually have a class. I'm going to see if I can record it so I can maybe include a demo somehow. I'm not sure how I'll do that. I'll see if I can figure that out. I'm going to think on that. I have a class later this week with a Japanese lesson, and I'm going to do this activity, but I'm not going to pre-select my objects. I'm just going to wander around my house, in fact, and I'm going to ask, oh, what's this? What's that? Oh, that's that. Okay. And then just like think of a 2-year-old, right? Get into the brain of a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old would not just say, what's that? And then move on with their life. Like if they point at a stapler, they're going to grab the stapler. They're going to start playing with the stapler. They might say stapler, stapler, stapler. They might open it. They might put their finger in there. Then you got to be careful. They don't hurt themselves, of course, because they might hurt themselves. They don't know any better, right? Then they look, and then the adult who's in the room might point and say, oh, look, staples, right? And they point inside the stapler and say, oh, look, there's staples in there, right? Then maybe staple is not a good example because the 2-year-old could hurt themselves, but let's say they couldn't. You might show, oh, look, it's staples, and you show how you staple paper, and you say, look, I'm stapling. And then they're watching and they're saying, oh, I'm stapling. Oh, okay. And they're getting all this in your head. So I'm going to do something like that. It's not just the objects. I'm trying to build real world hands-on connections in my mind with the vocabulary that I'm learning and attaching verbs to it, like not just the stapler, but I'm stapling paper. And initially, they're just going to come into my brain as phrases. Like I'm not going to fully understand the grammar, but you can absorb to a certain extent a certain amount of grammar without necessarily studying it. And so that's something I'd recommend. Make this an exploratory activity. In fact, I'll be honest with you, if you wanted to, theoretically, this is theoretical, but I'm about 90% sure I'm right on this. You could almost ignore the rest of this curriculum, ignore the rest of this whole program, do this activity, do it every day, every week, do this for a year, and just change where you do it. So instead of being in your house, take your phone, go to a park, do the same thing in a park. Then go to downtown in your city where lots of buildings, do it in your building, in downtown, excuse me. Then you go into your kitchen, then you go into your room, then you go into some boxes with some old things, and you're just exploring at all times and you're just asking, what's this? What's this? What does this do? Oh, and then the other person say, oh, this staples. You say, oh, staple, I'm stapling. And you're just, for some of you, that might work. That might be a whole strategy on its own, and you don't need to follow the rest of this. And you can get pretty darn far doing that for some people. Some of you can do that. So it's a very explorative exercise, very powerful exercise. You're modeling after young children, which, by the way, in some ways, depending on what behaviors you model and whatnot, sometimes it's not the best thing to do. But in this case here, this is a great thing to model, and it's something that'll be very, very, very effective. Especially for some of you that where this personality-wise is going to fit well. Yeah, this is one of the most powerful exercises in the entire program that I've put together. You can go, oh my God, I'm realizing now just how powerful this exercise is. I didn't realize it when I made it, but now that I'm really looking at this, I mean, you could do this at an upper intermediate level. This is almost like an evergreen activity that everybody could do. I could do this in like Spanish. I could go into, I'm really advanced in Spanish, by the way, it's almost like my English, but I could go to, if I just pick somewhere, like, with vocabulary that I'm not familiar with, right? If we go to a mechanic shop, if I could figure that out somehow, man, I would learn so much. Or if I went to even my own kitchen, there's probably stuff. Like, I don't know how to say, like, how do you say spatula in Spanish? Like espatula? Oh, that sounds right. That's probably it. But even there's probably a million things in my kitchen that, like, if I just went through my kitchen, took out the utensil, started to cook it, turned something on, tried to fry something, tried to like really describe it and do that exploratively. Yes, exploratively. Like, I think I'd bump into a lot of things I just don't know how to say, and I would learn so much. So even advanced students can do that, or intermediate students. Like, this is really, I almost wonder if this should be like an evergreen activity. I wonder, but very, very effective. Anyway, wow, we only got through one chunk of that book, but it is what it is. We'll wrap it up here. Next time, we're going to jump into this common adjectives. That's going to tie directly into the activity that I just introduced. You can actually blend it right in and add it right in. So it's going to be a nice transition for us in the next video. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your attention. Let me put this back on me. Hope it was helpful. As a reminder, if you have any questions or feedback or whatnot, just go to azrenthelanguagenerd.com/free course. And there's a little email button, so you can email me and ask me whatever you want to, or give me any feedback. So again, AZREN, thelanguagenerd.com/free course. And have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.